Welcome to the Supporters Fund, Ask an Investor. I'm your host, Jeffery Potvin, and let's please welcome Sanjeev, Kohli, founding partner of Glowfish Ventures, as our investor for today. Welcome, Sanjeev. It's a real pleasure having you join us today.
Thank you, JP. Excited to be here.
Well, there's a couple of things that I'm excited to dive in, mostly about your background, because I think it's really exciting when you have a background like McKinsey background, because not everybody gets the opportunity to spend as much time as you have in a career that's in working in such fast-paced tech, M&A, sales, such an amazing background. And I know you and I have chatted about this in the past, and you got to work on some pretty amazing and cool projects. So we're going to dive into that. But I guess the way we like to start the show is if you can give us kind of a deep dive background from the schooling all the way through to all the great things that you've done, and including obviously the venture that you've been working on for the better part of the last 6 years. If you can share a bit about that, and then one thing about you that nobody would know.
Oh, that's a lot to ask. All right, let's go down the memory lane a bit. So I am Indian, as you already mentioned. Grew up in Delhi. Went to one of the engineering schools in India, also in Delhi. It's called IIT Delhi. Spent 4 years of my life learning about electrical engineering and computer science. Then I did a little bit of research, and quite an interesting sort of detour from a typical career. I ended up working in Future Technologies division of British Telecom, where we did, amongst many amazing things, we were the first ones to do tele handshake. So we were the folks who sort of probably transmitted the sense of touch over internet for the first time ever. And this was about 20 odd years ago. So yeah, that's one of the things that not many people know about me. I'm answering that already because I want to go in a chronological order. Post that, went to Berkeley, continued my engineering career, realized I was probably not the best engineer. Amongst the skill sets that I thought I had, engineering wasn't at the top of it. So left engineering, joined the business world, went to McKinsey, spent about 13 years, had an amazing career, worked all over the world, from North America to Europe, Middle East, Asia, etc. And for the last 7 years, I've been building tech ventures out here in the Middle East.
Amazing. And I guess to take a step back to when you were working on the McKinsey side, you obviously got to work with a lot of big tech, but I think kind of where the interest for me is to explore what it's like to be working inside of a business like this, because I'm going to say that it seems exciting for someone who's never been in there. I have friends that have worked inside of these, obviously these big, massive consulting firms. Can you share a little bit about what it's like? Like, what is the environment? You're getting pulled into massive businesses to solve problems. And it's not just one person going in to fix it. There can be 100 to 2,000 people going in just to rehaul a business. Can you kind of share a little bit about what that experience details and why that brings so much value to your background?
Sure. No, I think you already summed up some of the insights I would say one would draw after spending time in there, right? There are times when you do need an army of 100 to 200 to 300 people to actually just turn around a business, a mammoth business. And McKinsey, like many other big consulting firms, work with a lot of top Fortune 500 type companies, big corporations, and it's not easy for 3 to 5 to 10 people to actually change the direction course of some of these businesses. So you do need at times literally an army to actually drive change, not just in the strategy, but in terms of how do you basically align the entire organization to drive the strategy forward and move in a particular way, sometimes across not just cities but countries, and sometimes across continents as well. So if I were to describe what it is like to work at McKinsey or one of the top consulting firms, I would say, at least, and this is true for the first few years, it's a bit like drinking water from the fire hose. I know it sounds a little bit cliched, but that's probably the best analogy. You are learning so much, you are absorbing so much, you are overwhelmed with responsibility, and of course, the implications of some of your actions are quite significant. So at least in the first few years, it can be quite overwhelming. just to be candid. And I literally felt like I was a hiring mistake. Later on, I realized many people felt that way, so that was a bit reassuring, and somehow I survived for over a decade. But the learning never stopped. It probably did not feel as overwhelming as it felt in the first few years. Kind of it is also, you get used to the expectation, so build a bit the muscle to deal with that level of stress and deal with that level of high intense pace of work. But the learning never stops. So very grateful for my background at McKinsey. Learned a great deal about how institutions work, how people work, how businesses actually create value, and equally importantly, learned a whole bunch of things that one shouldn't do, to preserve value, to make sure that you don't end up destroying value. So I'm just trying to basically port some of those learnings over and make sure we do things right in our own ventures.
It's interesting when you mention preserve values. So when you're going into these businesses, are they coming to you with a problem that they need to solve, or are they coming with stagnation and they need something to generate revenue? Are they coming with legal issues that have come up that they need to pivot the business because they're in patent infringements? What are some of the kind of typical areas that you saw that were being faced that you then had to come in and solve? Like, obviously there's a lot of work that you can put in. It sounds like it's continuous work and you're always grinding out probably new models and new theories and driving that strategy forward. But what were kind of the major impetus of what that shift needed to happen inside the business, and why?
So it's a loaded question. Unfortunately, cannot give a simple answer to that. Often, if you look at practitioners at McKinsey, they would over a period of time develop some sort of specialization or some sort of focus area, and that could be functional, that could be in industry specific. But if you were to say, okay, take a step back, what kind of problems do these corporations would face when you're working with them as a consultant? It's the whole spectrum. So some of them are struggling on the growth side, some of them are struggling with on the cost side of it, some of them are struggling because their business models are getting disrupted by super agile, super nimble, super fast attackers who are eating away their lunch. Sometimes it's just organization problems. People are just not, they realize the companies are not organized properly, and sometimes there's just lack of alignment of incentives. So if you were to look at the problems, you would find a full spectrum. Again, different companies go through different phases. It's very industry / phase of the company specific. But I did get quite a bit of exposure. But as I said earlier, while answering this question, over a period of time, you tend to develop a specialization or build sort of your own niche when you work for this long in some of these environments. So for me, what that meant was working in with companies and building new things. So how do you bring in the DNA of a startup or entrepreneurial spirit into a large multi-billion-dollar organization to build something? So over the past, over the last 4 or 5 years of my career with McKinsey, I ended up, building a lot of new businesses inside these large corporations, and sort of, that's I think also helped me appreciate what it takes to build some of these businesses, and that's what I've taken into my new life as well. But yeah, the problems that are faced by corporations on a daily basis are quite significant, and there's a whole spectrum of it. I just love the growth side of it.
I love it. And when this is all going on, are you pitching them? So they're coming to you and saying, hey, one of our clients is ADT. I don't even know why that came up, and your goal then is to say, well, let's get in there, look at some data and come back and build a business or build a solution or re-engineer something. Or are they actually well on the ball saying, we've got these 3 problems, you're in here to help us fix them, let's get to this and let's solve this?
It's both, quite frankly, right? At the end of the day, if you are going to work with a corporation in a meaningful way, you will probably not be able to do so as a transaction. So these things tend to have a life of their own. These relationships last for over multiple years with not just institutions but individuals within those institutions. So you are in constant touch with the C-suite, and you're having a bunch of interactions with them across multiple topics. And you want to stay relevant, and you want to make sure your clients stay relevant, right? As a consultant working for a client, you also take a lot of pride in your client's success. So you are proactively thinking, quite often about what could they do that would differentiate them in the market. So what that meant for me was, what new businesses could they build? What kind of new interesting levers could be pulled to drive growth? So yeah, often we would think about in our team as a think tank, what are those cool 5 things that we could bring to our clients. And the C-suite, in a similar manner, they're it's basically their day job, right? They are thinking about it as well. So often they would basically ask, how about this, how about that? Do you think we should do that, or we could do that, or what would it take to do that? So it would be an ongoing dialogue that, as I said, it spans over multiple years, and it's a relationship. And at any point, you find that aha moment saying, this does make sense at this particular time. So yeah, let's go for it.
I like that you added in that it's a relationship, so you're building on that. And I think the other side that really kind of intrigues this storyline is that when you are working with these businesses, it's not that they're not thinking about these things. They are re-engineering their models. In a Fortune 500 company, they're always rebuilding. They're always focused on growth and bottom line. And then having you guys kind of in their pocket to be able to come in, if there's a regulation issue or something, you're coming in to solve that problem and be able to move the business forward in the right direction. So they're looking for that expertise. Is that kind of a fair analysis of how a Fortune 500 company would be operating? They're a public company. They've got money. They want to maintain where they are in the space. They don't want to lose out. So they're always on the ball. They're always engaging and figuring out, can I build a new business? Can I work with a startup? What can we do? Is that kind of the idea that fits across the planes when you're working with them?
It does, actually. It quite accurately reflects the reality. Any consultant or consulting firm that thinks they know more than their client's business, they are, probably, not living in a real world. And I have seen my fair share of consultants across different kinds of firms, including McKinsey itself. And there are times you do believe that you know more, and life is a very humbling experience. The C-suite that is living and breathing and dealing with problems on a daily basis, I would say they are always probably a few steps ahead of you in terms of information. They understand their business better than you do. As an outsider, you don't. Where you do help as a consultant is you do bring a fresh perspective. There's a beautiful question called why, and there's a beautiful question called why not. It's tough at times when you are in the middle of operations on a day-to-day basis, dealing with 20 types of issues that could be super detailed, or that could be super existential, right? You as a senior executive, especially the CEO, you have to straddle across a pretty wide spectrum of issues. So I think the value that a consultant or a good counselor could bring to the table is to help pull these folks out a little bit from their day-to-day set of operating issues, and help them think a little bit more clearly, perhaps, and provide the right amount of impetus or fact base where they may need something to call, especially around the market, things that are outside of their organization, to help them develop a bit more clarity. I think that's probably the best role one could play when you're working with a Fortune 500 companies. You will not find these executives who would not have amazing ideas. It's just that at times, they're just too busy and they have a day job. As a consultant, what you do is your day job, but that's not the day job of your client. So I think a good consultant is able to harness the ideas of the clients, bring some fresh perspectives, especially in an outside-in manner, and help them make something better. It's very rare, and I have personally not seen where third party from outside just completely brought a bunch of new ideas to drive growth in a company, and the company had zero clue about it. That does not happen. It may happen in a movie, but it doesn't happen in real life.
I like this. So and I like the fact that you're saying that you're making it better. So now it sounds like you're kind of almost like a lawyer. You're building a case study to help them see an outside perspective. You're using as much data as you can to kind of prove this case study, to give them kind of an outside view into what they could look at doing or not. And then they're taking some of that and they're cutting little pieces out and saying, yeah, this is going to work. Great idea. This fits. Nope, this won't work. So they're kind of figuring out how they can adjust their engine, because there's a lot of people inside this organization, and how they can shift to it. What are the influencers that you kind of think you bring coming into this business with the information, with the data? What are those informational triggers? Like, what are you having to pull in order to be successful in the role that you had?
Well, I think you have to almost try to think about stuff, from a 10,000-foot level. You always have to start there and say, uh, where is this industry going? Where is this company going? Is there a potential, opportunity or set of opportunities that lie ahead of this company, given the context of the evolving industry that one could, participate in? And that is a role that a third party is almost by definition better suited to do, because they are not vested in the current assets, they are not vested in the current processes, also they're not vested in the current set of people. So, as a shareholder, you get a lot of value when a neutral third party looks at it. And it's interesting. You drew an analogy with lawyers. One of my mentors at the firm, sorry, we still call it the firm, used to always, equate us with lawyers, because lawyers tend to be partnerships. Lawyers are not publicly listed institutions because they don't have shareholders. They are partners, and partners have clients. And I do think fundamentally, as a consultant, as an advisor, that model is a superior model. And why is that superior? Is because it allows you to make certain trade-offs. It allows you to make certain choices that you would not be able to make if you were a corporation and you were answerable to your shareholders, whose objective was to maximize profitability. So it's funny that you touched upon the law firm perspective here. So a good consulting firm, I think, has to operate and take a similar level of responsibility like typical law firm partners would take.
I love it. And now this kind of shapes up to taking a startup and the model and what's going on here. How often are these Fortune 500 companies investigating early tech? Are they investigating it as more of just a hearsay, something to know about? And taking McKinsey, are they looking at this saying, hey, here's some stuff that's happening in the market. We're projecting in 10 years, you need to be here in order to keep growing at 20% a year, et cetera. And here's some of the tech that may do this. So we want to keep this on the radar. So is there an engagement that's happening, or are they just so many leagues ahead that they don't really have the time to pay attention to these smaller, pre-seed, seed, Series A companies, and they're working too hard to get into a business when they should be coming there at a Series A or a Series B when they're doing 10, 20 million, instead of, a lot of focus where startups tend to say, hey, I'm working with this big company, and you're trying to tell them, wait a sec, guys, maybe put the brakes on and work on some smaller mid-sized companies and get your proof points in, because these big players don't really have the time. They're trying to make sure that they're growing every year, and this might not be the vehicle for them. So they may kick tires with you, but they really don't have the expertise or the knowledge to be able to dive into something so early, if you will, in the business market.
Again, it's a very interesting question. There is the soundbite answer, and there is the reality. One would like to believe that they are looking at all potential new startups, new innovations, new technologies that could disrupt them. But then there is a reality of delivering the quarter-over-quarter performance. So I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. Depending on how big the corporation or the company is, depending on the nature of their business, are they in a heavily regulated industry versus, in a super high competitive, low barrier to entry industry? I think the focus of executives would be more or less on some of these innovations that are happening within their sector. If I would compare executives from industries that are heavily regulated, licensing, etc., tend to be a barrier to entry in these industries, right? They probably are not going to look after super early stage tech innovations with the same level of keenness that, for example, retailer would, right? Because in a heavily competitive, no regulation, low barriers to entry kind of a market. So, the first set of folks would probably look at companies that do pass the Series B, C stage, because for them, there is more certainty in the business model that they can feel comfortable about before they can choose to place big bets on these kind of innovations. Now again, I'm overly generalizing. Life is never this black or white. So do some of the heavily regulated industry players end up buying super early stage companies that have a lot of promise? Yes, but their acquisition in general overall would probably skew towards a little bit more mature companies, because their business model doesn't move that quickly, that it's not as nimble. On the other end of the spectrum, as I said, take high-end retailer, or not high-end retailers, just retailers overall. They would probably look at and scan what else is out there that could help them get that extra 2 percentage point margin in their overall ecosystem, because for them these things could be existential if they miss the boat. So the level of scrutiny, I think, depends on the company's situation and the industry situation. But I've seen people get very excited about super small companies, and I've seen people not getting excited about reasonably large size companies as well. So it's a very interesting set of situations that you deal with.
Well, it's good to know, because as you've shared this journey and what you've gone through, it puts it in perspective for a startup that is pitching or trying to get into these big conglomerates, how long it takes for something to cycle through and where the value comes from. And you did mention, of course, preserving value and growth. And these businesses it takes a long time to shift and move a business. And if they're sending hundreds of consultants in to make that pivot and shift so that they can bump themselves up 10% over the next 3 years, you know that things are going to take a long time to shift and approve and go through. So I think the mindset is that there are possibilities, there's one-offs, but really let's be focused on come with some real heavy hitters, go in and get some earlier stage clients and customers that can take you on before starting to play with the big players, because that could just take a lot longer, and don't want to waste that time. And I think you kind of shared that there's one-offs, of course, nothing's that always that black and white, but I think at the end of the day, there's a way to look at your approach to a market. And then when you were talking about building companies within the company, which I think is pretty exciting, you're maybe exploring some of that earlier tech. So you kind of probably will be out there on the marketing side, but maybe you can share a little bit about this, because my experience when I was working at one of the largest retailers in Canada at the time, I was running all of these innovation projects. And I think for every 10 cool innovation projects I had, one made it through to get into the next stage, which is approval and start getting pushed out in the business. And that took years. So there is, I wouldn't say it's fast, but they really handpick the ones that are going to save money or make a lot of money. So maybe share a little bit about what that duration takes, because again, this puts it into context for people that are working in this space. It could take 10 years for something to really flourish. How does that really look when you're starting to dive into a big shift in a business?
Well, I cannot say that I have not seen what you just described before. I can say that I've seen that to be the norm than the exception. So it is very real, very difficult to actually come out with breakthrough innovation in a corporate environment. The companies that are able to do that better than the others tend to be the ones that understand the alignment of incentives at individual level better. What do I mean by that? To take the example of a startup, right? A startup that goes on to create, let's use jargon and some of the buzzwords, becomes a unicorn, ends up creating billions in dollars in value, is very, I would be very surprised that it is not the result of blood, sweat, and tears. So the founders really have to grind. They really have to work with limited means, resources early in their early days, hustle, constantly try to raise funds, meet a whole bunch of, stakeholders to try and figure out how can they, debottleneck some of the issues they're facing, so on and so forth. And all that result of blood, sweat, and tears over, the years, for some of these founders results in tons and tons of value creation, which they share with the other, investors that have come along in their journey, over the years. But when that happens, these founders tend to also strike gold. So there is a clear alignment of incentives in these startups, which is, if the company ends up, finding the product market fit, if it ends up being able to, scale up in a fast manner, go ahead of the competition, then there will be a scenario where everybody who has been part of the journey will be incredibly well off financially, if by no other metric, right? Corporations typically struggle to create that alignment of incentives. In my personal opinion, I'm broadly generalizing here and probably exaggerating a bit here. I think this is the companies that understand that they need to align the incentives of people who are driving this new innovation almost in a similar manner as founders of startups tend to do much better with corporate innovation than the ones where you have salaried employees who may potentially get a discretionary bonus at the end of the year, because the alignment of incentives is just not there. And you would find actually very good, interesting, brilliant ideas die on the table because the idea is great, it will make a ton of sense for the company, but there is no good individual in there for whom it's worth burning the midnight oil. So I think that's to me the big difference. How do you create that alignment of incentives within the corporation? And I focused a lot on that. Saw firsthand some of the examples that were great and some of the examples that didn't go so well, right? So introspected quite a bit. And again, in hindsight, it's very simple, right? If there is somebody who is going to be incentivized to make a $50 million business within a multi-billion-dollar organization, which actually creates quite a bit of value, even though revenue-wise it's a fraction of the overall business, but value-wise it creates a ton of value of shareholders, and this individual also will do very well, then the likelihood of that individual or set of individuals, working to achieve that common objective is much higher.
Well said. I love it. So I guess the best way to shape this is that I guess the takeaway is that as a founder is building a company and working their way into a large corporation, there's probably a point where it makes more sense to start to align to their strategy, figuring out what their strategy is, and start to bake in your business model into that. And that's probably at a later Series A stage. You're vetting it beforehand, but you're trying to work your way into where their strategy fits. If you're looking for an acquisition, starting too early may actually cause probably too much knowledge sharing, and have that business maybe take some of that information and start to build it into their own business because they've got that time to waste and they've got people that are doing the 9 to 5, as you kind of alluded to, and that they don't have real heavy incentives to go fast, but they've got incentives to kind of build it out and be strategic enough so that in the future it will be something bigger. So it kind of aligns that if you're going to do something, you might as well wait when you've got all your guns going and blazing than it is to go in too early when you're at your weakest point and not have the ability to sell through in a proper fashion.
Absolutely. There is an old saying, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. So,
That's a good point.
If the opponent is not as agile and nimble, but they do have the bazooka, which in the current analogy means lots of funding, then the odds are not in your favor. So yeah, in a scenario like that, I would probably go a bit later than go a bit early. Again,
and it kind of
no general rule here, right? But you have to weigh the situation, where you kind of stand. But if you can stretch your existing funding and dollars to push your product market fit just that little bit further, to scale just that little bit further, it's always beneficial.
I love it. Well, you shared some great insights. The relationships, preserve value, why or why not, some clarity, make it better. I think there's a lot of great things you shared there. Maybe we can just now kind of dive in quickly and touch base on kind of, I guess, maybe the last 5-6 years as being the founding partner at Glowfish Ventures. Maybe you can share a little bit about where the background and the philosophy and how you guys are driving the business forward and how you're helping early stage companies today.
Sure. So Glowfish Ventures came about over a period of 2 years, I would say. We didn't one fine day wake up and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. In reality, just like in life, the punchline is always more interesting, but there is always a journey behind it. In our case, the journey was through the lens of one of the startups we invested in. Some of us as me and my partners, while I was still at McKinsey and they were still at McKinsey. And we saw that startup go through various stages of struggle in its existence, and in figuring out how do you build the product, and figuring out how do you find the product market fit, and figuring out how do you scale, and figuring out what not to do on the on the operation side of it, so on and so forth. And when we saw the journey from up close, there were a couple of aha moments for us, right? The first one was, we realized that a whole bunch of these problems that we're seeing, they are pretty basic, and we can also see a lot of other startups facing those problems. So we said, well, then clearly there's a role for institutionalizing some of this learning. And secondly, we realized that often, at least in the Middle East at that point, there weren't a lot of, I would call founding teams. Now the concept is pretty well understood amongst founders as well, and they typically, go, build businesses in a pack. But there typically would be solo founders, best case 2 of the folks. But there wasn't a rounded sort of set of skills across the spectrum of the business, the operations, the digital, marketing, product building, etc. side of it. So we said, okay, there is clearly a role that we could potentially play as an institution, and that's when we came about. And we set ourselves to be a venture building fund. We're domiciled in Cayman Islands, we get involved pretty much from, I would say, pre-seed to seed. Very rarely at the Series A level, because we love to act as an institutional co-founder with the founders and solve exactly the problems that I just talked about, right? Which are complement the founders on the skill set they typically lack, on the tech and marketing side of it, and B, make sure the institutional learnings that we have had on what not to do, we sort of, the company sort of stick and adhere to those things so that they get a lot of things first time right. And we've been incredibly lucky that we have had many more learnings since then, because we built, probably 10 ventures since that date. And, the second venture did much better than the first one. And, when I say much better, if you were to use the KPI or metric of time to Series A funding, right? If we use that as a metric, then yeah, the second one got there 30-40% faster than the first one. The third one got there another 30-40% faster. The latest one was there in 9 months. So yeah, I mean, we have clearly seen the value of sort of institutionalizing this process of building businesses.
I love it. And 10 of them already. So that is huge. And the reason why I like that.
Sorry, not all of them are around. We do take a lot of bets on new business models as well, right? And we have a pretty rigid sort of focus on making sure we don't throw good money after bad money. So we take decisions about cutting our losses in terms of shutting down some of the businesses where we are not excited anymore because new facts have presented themselves, either in terms of the market reality has set in or something else has made us feel less excited about them. So yeah, we have about 5 left. So about, I would say 50% is okay rate. We're quite happy with that. And if it continues, I think life will be great.
No, that's great. And what I love about the way you guys have done this, obviously the whole piece of it's good by building out these ventures and then carrying them through. But what you just shared with is that, again, this goes back to a founder understanding and mentality, is that as you're building something, if you can't see the scalability, you can't see the opportunities, and you can't see the growth after 1, 2, 3 years, there is a point where you can shut this down and build something different. You can walk away from that. I think there's this fear of failure of walking away from something that you can't see the light, or you can't see that 5-year or 10-year plan. And I think that's something that founders really need to take inside and have more investors, more VCs, more people like yourself sharing that and saying, hey, we had 10, now we got 5. That's allowed. Like you can take a step back if it's not going to go in the direction you want. And then the other side of it was that you shared taking these companies and taking a company that was, say, not so good the first one, and then you were able to scale the second one 3 months faster, and then the next one 3 months faster than that one. And the reason why that resonates with me, it kind of clicks in my head. It's like your first fund, your second fund, your third fund. You're always going to get sharper, better, quicker at making choices, making decisions, building something forward. I know when I did I convert single dwelling homes into duplexes. My first home took 1.5 years. The second home took me a year. The third home took me 9 months. And you're like, well, how's that happening? Because you keep figuring out ways to be way more effective and efficient. So it's the same thing a founder is going to do. They have to start to look at that and say, you know what, I'm in year 2, I'm in year 3, it's my first business. Maybe I'm not going to get the scaling. Maybe it's not worth raising. Maybe I just break it apart. And I think those are hard questions to ask or hard discussions to have with investors. But I think it makes sense. And you're kind of topping that by saying, yeah, you do need to look at this. It is a smart way of running business.
No, absolutely, absolutely. You'll be surprised how many investors actually understand that and are supportive of the founders. Again, I'm generalizing. I'm sure situations where investors are super unhappy when the founders decide to basically, turn off the lights and says, put the shutters down. This is not going to go anywhere. But if you have investors on your cap table that have seen some of these cycles, then you'll be very surprised how often your own existing investors might open doors for you if they believe that you have the right capability, you have the right mindset, and you have the perseverance. Then they would often not want to let go of you, to be honest. A failed founder is worth his weight in gold, as we say, because they have a very different, much more enhanced empathy for capital, and that's not easy to develop. So once you've struggled, you have a very, very different sort of approach towards building your second business, and we've seen that firsthand. And quite frankly, that's just like getting a degree, if not more relevant. I would argue it's actually far more relevant, but it's literally like going to gym and building is a different muscle, right? And in the business of building businesses, that muscle is super valuable. So we value failed founders a lot, and often when you talk to them, you learn a lot of things, and I personally learn on a daily basis when I interact with them.
I love it. Well shared. Well, we're going to transition now into our case study. Maybe you can share a little bit about a founder, he or she, what they've done to kind of overcome the barriers to be successful, or to pivot, change, or even fail. Something that really shows what it takes to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think maybe the first founder we had, who essentially I should give a lot of credit for helping us embark on our own journey, is a great example. She's a phenomenal woman. She started this business in 2000, so it's not 2015-ish time frame. It started as a marketplace that will help you find a particular service provider. I'm of course not going to go into the specifics of it because I don't have the liberty to share names and details, but I'll try to provide as much color into the character as possible. So she started with building the business in a particular industry as a marketplace, help customers meet suppliers or providers within that industry, and that industry is very opaque. It's very hard to find good quality suppliers, word of mouth, but you don't know what you're going to get when you try to hire one of these. So she set out to solve their problem and create transparency into an incredibly opaque industry and help customers have consistently better experiences. That was the vision down on day one when she started. Great vision, made ton of sense, just not commercially viable because that industry is still niche. The market is just small, and if you operate as a marketplace, then your margins are even smaller. So did customers get tons of value out of that business in the first couple of years? Yes. Did suppliers get tons of value out of that business? Yes, because they got a lot of interesting customer orders, and it allowed really the good suppliers to, in an objective manner, tell the market that we are better. Look, this third party has our ratings consistently at 5-star or 4.9 star versus some of the rest. It allowed them to actually even charge a premium on their service delivery. So as a business, the business created tons of value for customers as well as suppliers. The business itself did not make, as much, did not get as much traction as we would have hoped for, because the realization that the market is not as big as we thought did set in. But at that point, as a founder, it's a pretty tough message. You wake up one fine day and you realize, that the funding taps are drying, and there is actually a problem in front of you, which is not really in your hands to solve. You wasted a couple of years of your life. What do you do now? I'm not focusing on the smaller problems, but this is, one of the existential problems that happened in a couple, and she faced in a couple of years. And like any entrepreneur, she didn't let it, she didn't let it put her down, mentally. Instead, she set out to say, okay, how do I now leverage what I've got and find bigger markets? So she pivoted, from one service business. She ended up creating a business that now allows customers to book 60, 70 different kinds of services. They're not identical. The business models are very different, but she's found a way to constantly integrate new services. Even though the processes are, quite different across different services, but she has found a way by leveraging tech and operations to create a business that now is able to, take that fixed cost of the HQ and the tech investments, and is allowed to actually, or allows it to actually get amortized over a large number of transactions across different service lines. So phenomenal pivot. She also realized that she was not building the organization in a particular way to cater to the demands of her moving business. So she then rationalized some of the FTEs on a particular side of the business and repurposed a lot more on a different kind of a business. She realized that, okay, I am going to be a very different kind of company. Yes, I'll still have the tech sauce on top of it, but I am not truly a tech company that scales on its own. I am an ops company. So she completely changed the organization focus, the kind of people she hired. And then, fast forward 8 years later, she's sold that business, full exit. She's doing very well. We're very happy for her. And, we have learned a lot of stuff along the way because of her perseverance. So if I were to look at the candidate, I would say, this is a candidate that had a vision, skills, and the perseverance, and the curiosity to question whether her vision was right. And when new facts presented themselves, she was able to actually do justice to them.
I love that curiosity. It sounds like she had the grit too, to just keep tackling the problems and pivoting and making sure she hit market demand and needs. So that's pretty amazing.
I wouldn't be able to deal with half of those problems, and I'm being, quite generous to myself. So yeah, phenomenal character. So that's why, it's not everyone's cup of tea, and it shouldn't be everyone's cup of tea either. By the way, entrepreneurship is hard. It's full of ups and downs. It's no entrepreneur will tell you that, oh, it was super easy. They left their nice corporate job that was taking care of all the expenses, and threw themselves at the deep end without any certainty of a fixed income stream, and then life was super easy and bed of roses, and now they are multimillionaires because they've done so well. If somebody tells you that, the odds are they're probably not sharing the reality, right? So it is tough, it is hard, it's not for everybody. And I think a lot of people should also understand what are they getting into before they get into it. So I've seen entrepreneurs not realizing how tough things can get, and then it comes as an after effect. But hey, in some cases, those entrepreneurs are the true entrepreneurs who basically lift themselves up when the chips are down, and make something out of nothing.
I love it. It's true. And well shared. Well, we're going to transition now into the rapid fire questions. So the way this works is you're going to pick one or the other, coming in obviously as the investor. We'll start with business, and then we'll jump into personal.
Okay.
Ready to roll? All right. Let's do this. Founder or co-founder?
Co-founder.
Unicorn or a 4-year 10x exit?
4 years, 10x exit. I'm a low risk appetite guy, I guess.
No, it's perfect. Pure venture. Tech or CPG?
Tech.
NFT or Web 3.0?
Web 3.0,
AI or blockchain?
AI,
First time founder or second, third time founder?
second, third time founder any day.
First money in or Series A?
First money in,
Angel or VC?
VC.
Board seat or observer?
Doesn't matter. Either of those is fine. Depends on the situation.
Okay. Safe or convertible note?
Safe is fine.
Lead or follow?
Lead, given our first money in principle.
Equity or interest payments?
Equity.
Favorite part of investing?
Meeting incredible individuals, learning about a lot of cool things that are happening.
Number of companies invested per year?
3 to 4.
Awesome. Any preferred terms?
The ability to guide the company's direction. So, that typically manifests itself in terms of board rights, etc.
Okay. Verticals of focus?
Healthcare, love it. Marketplaces as a functionality, also love it.
2 qualities a startup needs in order to stand out to you.
Founding team and the scalability of idea.
Perfect. All right, we're going to jump into the personal side. Book or movie?
Movie.
Superman or Batman?
Batman.
Fortune cookie or birthday cake?
Fortune cookie.
5 minutes with Bezos or Oprah?
Oprah.
Mountain or beach?
Mountain.
Bike or run?
Bike.
Big Mac or chicken McNuggets?
Vegetarian, pass on both.
Fair enough. Trophy or money?
Money.
Beer or
I can
wine?
buy trophies. Whiskey.
Perfect. TED Talk or book reading?
TED Talk, any day.
TikTok or Instagram?
TikTok, way more fun.
Facebook or LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, I mean, I don't remember when was the last time I was on Facebook.
Me neither. Most famous person that pops in your mind?
There's so many. So it's hard to say. You have to narrow it down. Which field are we talking about?
Anywhere, just first name that pops in your mind. First
Lionel
person.
Messi, I just watched him in the World Cup. So that's the first name that comes to my mind as a famous guy.
Ah, perfect. Yeah, he's pretty famous. He's doing all right. Favorite movie and character you would play?
Ooh, favorite movie and character I would play. This is very difficult. I have a very bad memory. So, if you were to ask me what my favorite movie is, probably, the answer changes year over year. So I pass. Very difficult to answer that.
All right, fair enough. Favorite book?
Malcolm Gladwell's Freakonomics. I would
I
highly
love
encourage
Malcolm.
everybody to read it.
It's a great book. I listened to his
I-
all 10 of his podcasts and everything. Yeah, he's awesome. Great choice. Great choice.
The biggest learning for me in my professional career was incentives drive behavior. It's very intuitive. It's almost so simple and straightforward that one would say, what else did you think? But it's not that easy to internalize. At least it wasn't for me. I think that book was very helpful and instrumental in helping me see things in a very different way.
Oh, I agree 100%. I love data and reading anything and anything to do with data, especially on that side of it. It's economical data and how they solve problems. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. First brand that pops in your mind?
Coke.
Favorite sports team?
Indian cricket team.
Nice. All right, we're down to the last 2 questions. What is the meaning of success to you?
Having a lot of fun while doing what you're doing.
Works. And what is your superpower?
I can do probabilities well, so I can play poker reasonably okay.
I like that. It's a good superpower. I think you're also very engaging. So I think that also makes a big difference in the way that you work with people. So I'll add in an extra bonus for my perspective. How's that?
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Well, you bet, man. You bet. Well, I'm going to say, Sanjeev, it was brilliant getting to dive in and chat to all of these things. And I'm sure there was a ton of learning for startups and for investors along. I wrote lots of notes. I guess I'm addicted to the note writing while we talk, but I want to 100% say thank you very much for all of your time today. You were fantastic. And the way we like to end our show is that we like to give you the last word. Anything that you want to share to the investor community, to the startups, I turn it over to you. But again, thank you very much for sharing and being part of this.
Well, thank you very much for having me and offering me the last word. I guess I will part with sort of two set of thoughts. First one to founders and the second one for investors. For founders, I'd basically advise them to try things fast, fail fast. So do not keep on thinking about building the product, figuring out the pricing, business model, so on and so forth for a long time. Go to the market, launch ASAP, because the market is an incredible teacher and it'll help you find your product market fit much better than trying to find it on the whiteboard. So just fail fast, be quick to execution and bring something to market. For investors, they probably know most of this stuff, so not really sure if it'll be of immense value. But what I typically do is ask three questions when I'm thinking of making an investment. The first one almost always is this a big enough idea? Is there scalability in it? Is there a market that is not too crowded, or is it a new market that can be created with reasonable degree of excitement behind it? So is it just a big market? Is there a big piece of pie that one can go after? That's the first thing I look at. Second thing I love to look at is the quality of the team. Is this team going to do justice to the idea, essentially, right? Are these the right guys with the right skill set and or an understanding of what they're missing, and hence the ability to bridge some of those capabilities, and do they have the personal grit and determination and the perseverance we were talking about earlier to face the adversities that no doubt will be looking at them in their journey? So is this the team that you would back? And last but not the least is is the deal, is it a good deal, right? End of the day, a lot of great ideas, companies going after big visions and reaching for the stars, going after big value creation theses with amazing people, but the deal is simply not good enough. So, and at some point you have to say, this is a walk away and I will not pay more than that. That's something that I try to do, and I hope it is of if it is some sort of refresher for all of you as well. So thank you.
Perfect, Sanjeev. Sanjeev, I love the points, man. These were great. Great follow-ups. Thank you very much for that. And we hope to have you back again, but thank you again for sharing.
Thank you, JP. It was my pleasure to be around. Cheers.
Okay, that was awesome. Sanjeev shared some great insight. Really loved how we were able to dive into his background and really explore how that McKinsey side came through. And just from some of the points that we talked about, preserving value, finding what that value is, building those relationships so that you can be in and out, pitching things and growing with inside the organization you're working with, a customer. Also the answering the question why or why not, building clarity into what you're doing and how to make things better, how to keep pivoting and re-engineering that. And what I liked about that when we talked about, the first one took extra amount of time, and the second one they did it 30% faster, etc. And the third one, it was better and faster than the first one they made. That's exactly how you have to work on your pivots and your changes inside your business. And I think you really shared that nicely, and it really puts it into context. And just to reiterate, when you are pitching in your early on company, like you said, it's tough for those big businesses to shift to be able to take on these really smaller opportunities, even if they are earth-shattering ventures. Really, you got to focus on going after the customers that can use your product and get in there, move quickly, and then go pitch the big people, the big 500 or 1,000, whatever that number is that you're going in and pitching. It's going to help you move faster and not give away all of your insights. And then to his last three things on startups, you have to think the same way, which is, is the idea big enough? Is it scalable enough? Do you have the right team, or who's missing from that team that you can kind of go out and get? And then are you putting out a good deal? I think that makes a big difference. And I know he pushed this to the investor, but this is also something for the startup to think about. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. You have me from Mumbai, India, having this conversation with Sanjeev in Dubai, which is fantastic. Great podcast. But if you joined this conversation, please feel free to share with your friends or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and or Stitcher. Feel free to share an audio video clip around our show. We may include it in one of our future podcasts. Find us at marketing@openpeoplenetwork.com. Your support and comments are truly appreciated. You can also check us out at supportersfund.com, or for startup events, visit openpeoplenetwork.com. Thank you and have a fantastic day.